Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to one of your favorite podcasts, Hi Vibin' It. We are very excited. It's just Lindsay and I today, your co hosts, kicking it. And we really thought it would be fun to dive into some ancestry talk and talk about our ancestors and things we can gain from connecting with them and learning about them. Lindsay is super into genealogy, which we'll get into a little bit, so she can speak on that. I have some pretty cool stories about my ancestors, my ancestry. So I think this is going to be a really fun episode where we just dive into the vibes of the past, but also like, is the past a thing or is it all happening simultaneously? Who knows? That's a debate for another show. But Lindsay, happy to chat
Yeah.
with you.
Yes, this is gonna be fun. And to be clear, I wasn't gonna do this yet because with a lot of things that I teach and that I do, I I know that I'm really good at it. I know that I can be seen as an expert in it because I've done so much work around it. With this, I still feel like a newbie, like a baby a little bit, trying to learn as much as I can. But Kelsey has great ideas, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, and I would have just not done it. You know that over preparation that people do? Yeah, that's what I'm doing with this because it is a huge passion of mine. And to be fair, there's so much in here. You could go the spiritual route, which is kind of what we're going to do today and talk about ancestral healing. You could go strictly by documents and do your genealogy like trail back as far as you can go. There are so many different directions you can take this, and I think all of them are beautiful and valuable. So, as Kelsey said, today we're going to scratch the surface of like what it is. Like, what is ancestral healing? Why should we care? Especially as people who are soul driven. Um, what does it matter where we come from? Because our soul is bigger than that kind of thing. So I want to talk about that a little bit because that was a big um, point of thought for me, I guess. I wanted to know how much of our DNA really affects us versus how much of our soul lineage uh affects us. So like past lives and like our particular ingredients that make us who we are traveling through time and space. And then how much does that DNA kind of affect? So what I've come to realize for me, I guess, in my experience and what I really make peace with is the fact that it's got to be like 50-50, I think. At least for me. Maybe for other people it's like 25-75, but I feel like it's 50-50. I feel like the things that have carried through the DNA must affect as much as your soul energy that you come in with. And I think that we as souls get to choose the perfect balance between this DNA, this body, and what the soul needs to learn. I think it just comes together perfectly. So, uh, where should we start? I mean,
Well, I just
we
want to
can,
add to what you just said because it makes
yeah,
sense to me that it would be kind of like a 50-50 blend of who you are is made up of like who you have been and also like your ancestry. Because from a spiritual perspective, if we are all one and you are everything, then your ancestors aren't really separate from you. Like they
yeah,
are you, but also so is everybody else. But like if we're staying more close to home, like
yeah.
ancestors would be a little more close to home.
And
So
you
I
are
think that makes sense
physically,
that it would be a pretty even blend, but who knows?
I like that. And you are physically made up of everybody that came before you. Like that is insane when you think about. I tell my kids they must think they don't care. Hopefully someday they will, but I'm just like, do you know how many times you almost weren't born? Not in
It's
those
kind of
words,
like a
but like,
threat.
but if I say, I know, right? Do you know how many times? But like, if I find something in my tree, the idea that like, if they were at this place 5 minutes later, they wouldn't exist. Like, so many stories like that. I have so many stories like that where this person was just out of town or he just wasn't there when this horrible thing happened and they almost didn't exist. And so then I
Crazy.
wouldn't exist. It's just
Right.
so many people had to do extraordinary things in order for you to be listening to this episode. Like it's just insane how cool it is. And I can tell I'm getting like super passionate, but it really, it really is like so cool. Anyway, so one thing I want to get out of the way is people wonder like how DNA can affect you. Like, how can this chemical, or whatever, this thing that makes me who I am, how can I be affected by people that came before me? And the way that I kind of think of it is, we know that if you, let's say, slaughter a cow under stress, those stress chemicals get into the bloodstream of the cow and actually change meat. It changes the taste of the meat. And so, with these experiences that our ancestors have experienced and these events that have happened to them, it changed their DNA. It changed their emotional state. It changed their mood. It changed who they were as people. How many experiences have changed who you were, Kels?
A lot.
A lot. Of course it does. Good and not so good. So that is kinda how I come to terms with, like, okay, well, if that does affect, if it can affect livestock in that way, it's gotta affect humans in that way. And so I that's where I kinda get on board with this generational trauma and this, like, energy, that gets carried through generations that you may not even know where it comes from, but it goes beyond, what you can see. It's just a feeling, the same way that alcoholism can run in families and abuse can run in families. I think the DNA definitely has an effect, and that's maybe part of it. Is the abuse that you experience or the trauma that you experience unconsciously gets passed down. And so that's when this ancestral healing work and this idea that you could kind of correct some of that is so important, even just to look into, because holy crap, you don't even know how much better you could be experiencing this life once all of that is kind of free from you.
And on the
And,
flip
oh, you go. I have an and too. You have an and, I have an and. Go.
Okay, we'll go back and forth. So I was gonna say, and on the flip side of that same coin, what doesn't get talked about a lot, because I think ancestral trauma is kind of like popular right now because people are discovering it, which is good. But like what doesn't get talked about enough is that it's not only trauma that you inherit from your ancestors. Like it's not only bad things that gets passed down, it's also
Right.
skills, talents, interests, abilities, like
Yeah.
everything good too. So you have all the strength of your ancestors with you and probably some of the faults of your ancestors with you too. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about being someone who's into personal development and dedicated to their own healing and well-being is that when you heal your stuff, it trickles back down through time, through the lines to heal everyone and everything. So, what I always tell people, because a lot of people come sometimes to me in session and they'll be like, well, what do you think about like if my ancestor had this, like, am I going to have this? Or like, if I'm struggling with this, like, what do I do about it? And I'm like, well, listen, what you're struggling with now, like, it could have been passed down, or it could be your own thing, or it could be a combination of the both. But you doing your own healing work is fixing everything from the past in a way,
Yeah.
energetically.
Absolutely.
So, like, you don't have to go necessarily searching through the past to find problems for you to heal. Like, if it's something that you're meant to heal, it'll be your problem. Like, it'll be your challenge. It'll be something that's coming up for you in your life. So, don't feel like pressure, like, oh my gosh, I have to go back in my line and figure out everything that was wrong and
Yeah.
fix it all. It's like, no, whatever is being a challenge for you, that's your opportunity to do some healing, and just start with yourself, and the rest, it like trickles through time and space in a good way.
Yeah, we definitely can't forget that good things get passed down too. I think that the reason trauma is so popular is because that's the stuff that is kind of holding you back. But it is very important to recognize both. I watch a ton of these like ancestry, genealogy, family tree shows. I can't get enough of them, to be honest with you, and there needs to be more. So if anybody's listening that
Wait, so
creates
share
TV
some of these
shows,
shows.
okay, so there's Who Do You Think You Are, which is actually an ancestry show. I think they both are that I watch. There's Who Do You Think You Are? It actually just came back for a new season in 2022. So it was off
Fun.
the air for like 8 years or something, and I've watched all of them like multiple times. But they take a celebrity, because apparently nobody cares about it unless you're famous, but
True.
whatever. They take
Ratings.
a celebrity and they actually like study their family tree and take them to the places that their ancestors lived. So it's kind of like a travel show
Cool.
too. It's so cool. It's like a whole genealogy like travel show. It's fantastic. I always watch it because I've done so much work on my family tree. I always watch it to be like, do we have common ancestors? And it's like most of the time we don't, but sometimes we do, and that's pretty interesting. But there's that one, and then there's Finding Your Roots, and that's a PBS show. You can also get it on Amazon with Henry Louis Gates Jr. And he does pretty much the same thing, but they don't travel. So he'll actually like take them through their genealogy and tell them stories about their ancestors and stuff. And then there's the Genealogy Roadshow, which is kind of like Antiques Roadshow, but I can't get it because I don't get that program through my subscriptions, and they don't have it. They don't have new episodes on PBS, but if you are inclined and you have those services, highly recommend those shows. But I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh, I watch so I watch a lot of genealogy shows, and so many times they'll find an ancestor who does something in the same vein of work that they do, or there's a passion that they had that they're like, "Oh my gosh, they played piano. I play piano. Like, what is that?" And it's just so interesting. I think you're absolutely right. Like, who you are is your soul, yes, and also every single person that came before you that dreamt of a day when you would be doing what you're doing. So we all have examples like that. I know the female ancestors that we had probably would never dream of us sitting on a podcast and talking to the world. Like, what does that even mean? It's just really cool. And also what I was going to say about what you said, it heals your lineage when you heal yourself. It also heals your future generations, because guess who isn't going to have to deal with that now? Your kids, your descendants. And so when you heal it for yourself, you heal it for all, which is incredible.
Yay. Yay for
Yay for
healing.
healing.
Jinx, you owe me a kombucha.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That was funny. I was too shocked to even jinx you.
Couldn't jinx me back. I beat you to the punch. But yeah,
Right?
so I think it would be fun to dive into, maybe like for illustration purposes, a little bit of our DNA and ancestral lines. And then from there, we can talk about some of the stuff that you wanted to talk about. Can we incorporate it into like our
Yeah, let's
stories?
go wherever
Does
you
that sound
want.
like a good flow for the show?
Totally.
So, what's interesting for me is I was always told by my parents that we were like French and Spanish and Italian and like that, and like Hispanic, and that was like the majority, which they weren't wrong, but they weren't right.
Yeah.
When we actually went to do the DNA and I got my results back, and they showed me like a breakdown of percentages from all the continents of DNA that I have, which is all of them. Um, it was interesting to see that the majority of my DNA was from Latin America. So I'm native Latin American, but only like a third, and that's my biggest portion. And then after that was Scandinavian. So I was like, how cool is that? Like, I'm literally descendant of Mayans and Vikings. Like,
Yeah.
don't fuck with me, right? So I was feeling like pretty powerful to know that. And then it came like all the European stuff, like Italian and French and Spanish. And then I was like 14% North African, which is basically like Egyptian. And I even had 6% Asian, which I thought was a lot,
Yeah.
considering I don't know anyone in my family who is Asian. But thinking about my grandpa, my dad's side, he actually always looked very Asian to me, even though I don't
Mhm.
know if he knew if he was. Um, and then, there was the 1% Jewish and the 1% this and the 1% that. But it was very interesting. And to learn that, it made me feel kind of connected to everyone, because I was like, I
Yeah.
literally have DNA from every continent. Like, I'm a rainbow child. I'm of all the people.
Yeah. We always joke that Kelsey has the same DNA as my husband because he has every single category, at least 1% in every
And we
category.
probably have relatives in Mexico, because we learned that both of our families date back to like a specific area and a specific type of people, which is the Zapoteca tribe. So we both have like ties to the same tribe, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Shout out to
Very, very
Abel.
cool.
Does he ever listen?
I don't think so, but our best friend Martin does. Hi, Martin.
Mhm.
I almost said his best friend. You're my friend too, Martin, I promise.
So tell us yours,
So
because the
I'm
people
just a
want to know.
white person. Um,
Can't.
Yeah.
Climactic. Way to make yourself sound so much lamer than you are. I'm just a white person.
Well, it is interesting, and I always laugh because it's hilarious when I see, and I've also seen these studies of, like, very racist people who find out that they're actually got African blood and they don't know what to do with themselves. I think it's so, so funny. It's just so dumb, right? Like, you're gonna have, who cares? You're gonna have DNA from everywhere, unless you're me and you have DNA from just white places. So I have England, Scotland, Germany, Sweden and Denmark, Norway, Russia, Ireland, and the Baltics, which, in case you don't know, is very, very white also. So I'm like, the bulk of my DNA is from the UK, so England, Scotland, and Ireland. But I grew up thinking, well, I grew up being told that my dad was British, meaning Scottish, and English, and my mom was German and Polish. So that's what I knew growing up, except my dad and mom both swore up and down that my dad's lineage had like a Cherokee Indian. And just, I didn't know this, but apparently every single person, white, black, Asian, Indian, whatever, will, oh, like Indian, not Native American, will always hear that story of like, there's Native American blood. We have a Native American in our blood. Yeah, it's almost never true. Based on every show I've ever watched, everyone who's like, yeah, we have Indian blood or Native American blood, native blood, the genealogist, whoever it is, just kind of chuckles and they're like, yeah, that was not real.
Do you
Like,
think that
everyone
people
thinks
just
that.
want to think that they have Native American ties so they don't feel so bad about what happened to
Ye
Native
yeah.
people?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I also think that they want to know that they have deeper roots in this country and that we didn't just plop here on the soil and like, "This is mine
Right.
now," even though that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I think that it has to do with just that desperate need to have roots in a place that you weren't meant to be, really. I mean, meant to be is relative, but that you were never, never had a connection to previously.
Foreign too.
Exactly. Yeah, so yeah, it's just really funny. Lo and behold, I have zero native blood. My dad has zero native blood. My mom has zero native blood, and so on. But
But that's why
my
you married a man with
my husband is
with
only native.
native blood so you could be complete.
Yeah, the funny story about that is I when I started doing DNA when my son was born, my first one, I was very into, like, and that seems to be a theme. Whenever people become parents, they get even more into, like, what am I leaving behind and what am I leaving to my kids? They need to know their history. I need to know my history. Some people do it before they have kids, but for me, it was, my son was like, okay, I really need to. I'd love to get into this now. So I had my husband take one, and his mom, my mother-in-law, was like, "Why? Like, you don't need to do, he's Mexican. What do you mean? Like, of course he's Mexican. You just don't waste the money on a test. He's Mexican." Yeah.
Yeah, more
Just
to that.
more to that. You remember Kelsey's what she just said? Yeah, his is pretty much, yeah. He is very, very native, which in the ancestry, as far as I know, in the ancestry tests, it shows indigenous Americas as part of Mexico. So the natives, they include Mexico in that,
Right.
in a category. So he's indigenous Mexican, indigenous Michoacan and southern Jalisco. Kelsey, please
Mhm.
save me on
Mhm.
these.
Yeah, Michoacan
Chihuahua,
and Southern Jalisco and
thank you.
Chihuahua. Uh-huh.
Chihuahua, Durango, and Zacatecas, which I think is you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that those are all like pretty much like where my family is from too.
where
So
they're
that's so
from.
cool.
So that's 37%. But 45% of him is Spain,
I
which
could see that.
still is colonization. So I mean, like, it is what it is. Basque, Senegal, Cameroon. He's got a little bit of African. So he's got Cameroon, Mali, Nigeria, Northern African. And then he's got Jewish in there, which is interesting. Sardinia, and
Same
then
with
he's
me. Weird,
he's
right?
1% English in Northwestern New York.
Love it.
1%. And I got like 45%. But anyway,
Measly
yeah.
1%.
Yeah, he's everything. He's everything. And so she was a little bit surprised. So then I made her do one. I made his dad do one. I made I made everyone in my circle do one. And I even, I paid for my aunt to do one on my dad's side because I wanted to see what she had that my dad didn't have. I just, yeah.
And
I'm
now there's
super
going to be
into it.
clones of everyone.
Now they're gonna just make so what I wanna say too, while we're on the topic of DNA, I know that people have different views on giving your DNA to a company, and that's fine. You don't need to have your DNA in any database in order to do any of this work. So
Good to
another
know.
thing that's interesting is if you go 4 generations back, so I think that's third great grandparents or fourth, third great grandparents, 4 generations back,
Yeah.
you have like a 0% chance of having any of their DNA specifically. So what it means is you'll have DNA from their kids. That's where it starts and kind of cuts off. Because you have 50% from your mom, 25% from your grandma, 13.5 from their parent, and so on and so forth. So by the time you get like a few generations back, you have virtually 0 of theirs, but the combination of theirs. Does that make sense?
So, how would people find out their DNA without going through one of these companies?
Well, you can't. I mean,
Oh, I thought you just
you
said that you
can't,
could, that there was a
but you don't.
workaround.
I mean, there are different companies. There's a ton of different companies that aren't Ancestry or 23andMe. There's Family Tree DNA, which I don't think that I think they proudly don't share it. I don't want to be wrong about this, so do your own research. But there's Family Tree DNA, which I also love. You can upload your current DNA to that site. You don't have to buy a test from there. There's myheritage.com. There's I know I'm forgetting a lot of them, but there's so many, and you can read the fine print to see where they share it. If they do, you can know all of that stuff beforehand. So,
Yeah, because
um,
wasn't it like a conspiracy that they were using people's DNA, but then it like wasn't because a lot of the big companies do use your DNA for different stuff. So do your own research, donate
yeah,
your DNA at your own risk. But when people get so up in arms about it, I kind of laugh because I'm like, well, literally everywhere I go, I'm shedding my hair. So if somebody really wanted my DNA, like all they have to do is like follow me around for 5 minutes and you're welcome. You have my DNA. Like,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do with it. I just know that I don't really care. I
I mean,
don't
I
want to
feel
waste.
like if you're cloning me, like,
I'd love to
you're
meet me,
welcome to the
wouldn't you?
world.
That's a whole other episode because, like, if you do get cloned, yes, it's a genetic exact match to you, but is it the same soul?
No.
No. So technically, it is a different person, which is
Weird.
weird. Yeah, I know. Okay, so yeah, you don't have to know your DNA in order to do ancestral healing, and we can definitely talk about the different ways to do that. But yeah, I just think it's so interesting, and when you have the DNA, you can it can confirm family stories that you've heard. It can give you new stories and new tales to give to your kids and actually be accurate because
Well, and
it's
I
your
think it
DNA.
gives you like a good place to start doing research so you can learn more about what your ancestors were up to, what types of
Yeah.
foods they were eating are probably going to be really compatible for your system, what types of
Yeah.
witchery they were doing. Remember in that witch episode we did, we were talking about how you should study like your own lineage of
Yes.
witchery and not just like be a generic witch burning sage because sage is from
Yeah.
native people, not like
Yeah.
white witches like Lindsay, right? So it's
White
interesting.
witches. Why isn't that the name of our podcast?
White witches, because you're a white witch and I'm like a brownish witch.
You're a delightful halvesy situation,
A mocha witch.
as they say on Schitt's Creek. I'm a delightful halvesy situation because he's Jewish and also celebrates Christmas. Okay, so yeah, and I mean the genealogy is different than genetics. I think that that might be a new. Some
Okay,
people might
make
know it,
that
some
more
people won't.
clear.
So yeah,
Explain.
so genetics is literally your DNA
Okay.
going back to like the beginning of your DNA. And genealogy is the study of your family tree. So just because they are in your genealogy tree doesn't mean that they're a genetic match, because if they are a fourth cousin, they may or may not even share DNA with you, but they are a genealogical match because you share an ancestor. It's just by the time it got down to you, it was diluted enough and mixed enough with different people that you lost that string of match with that person. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yes.
So genealogy tree is different than genetic DNA. They don't necessarily they're not the same, and the same people probably won't be in both. But if they are a genetic match to you, that means they are a close enough cousin or relative that they still share DNA with you. Um, And they can be in your genealogy tree and not share DNA, and they will still be related to you because they're still genealogically connected to you
Got
via
it.
people from hundreds of years ago and hundreds. Um, how much research have you done on your family tree?
Not any.
Really? You just have your DNA?
Really none. Yeah, I just know my DNA. I don't know too much about my family tree except I just have like a very confusing one in my mind that's not anywhere on paper visually. So,
Well, what
yeah.
I will say, and I wanna kinda say this to people who will mirror what I'm about to say. So, with my husband, I tried so hard, and again, he has very similar DNA to you. I tried so hard to put his tree together. It's just as important as my tree for the sake of our kids, right? It is virtually impossible. I mean, I'm not a professional genealogist. I've taken a course in genealogy from Boston University, and I am a genealogist, but I guess you'd call me like an amateur genealogist. I know what I'm doing, but I don't have access to a lot of the same things that professional genealogists do. So I would still have to hire a genealogist to explore my husband's tree because there is nothing. Like, I have nothing. I know his family name, I know dates, I know places, but no hints pop up. I
Well, and it
search,
makes
nothing
sense because if you
happens.
think of native people, they're basically meant to be wiped out, you
But
know?
girl, I'm talking like one generation back. There's
Hmm.
no record. Once you
Interesting.
go from like his grandparents lived here, so there's records of the censuses and things like that and where they lived, but their parents, you go down to Mexico and it's just like nope,
Yeah.
nothing. Brick wall city.
Interesting.
And I know and I ask my husband, I'm like, I tell him stories about mine, and he's just like, "Oh, that's cool," but I can tell he's just humoring me. I'm like, "Don't you like, if I had these stories for you," which I still promise him I am not gonna stop, I'm gonna look. He does not care. He goes, "Yeah, I probably wouldn't care. I don't care. I don't care." I don't understand that, first of
He
all.
doesn't have
Like,
the spark yet
what kind of
for it.
human doesn't care about their lineage? But I know that they're out there, and I'm sorry, I don't wanna be judgy, but, like like
Well, I doubt they're listening to this episode if they don't care. So I
skip
think
it,
you're
skip
good.
the episode. But it's just like, if you're somebody who doesn't want to know or doesn't care, you definitely should skip this. But if you don't care, you could still do ancestral healing. I just don't know that you would want to or think that it's even a real thing. Um, but there are people out there that just don't care. And I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Especially as like Americans, especially as Americans, you probably your country of origin is probably not, I mean, if you're white, is probably not here. So the need and desire to feel as if you come from a community or come from a place of origin is strong within me, and I know it isn't within you as well, Kels. I just if I can give anybody that or offer that to anybody, I just think it's so priceless because we are orphans here on this in this country. We don't have the gift of like, oh yeah, my 12th great grandfather grew up in this city. Like, yeah, it's miles away across an ocean for us. And so we feel like maybe connecting to our genealogy or our family tree in that way could be very powerful. But maybe it's because he's from here that he's just like, it's cool. I know I belong here,
Well, I think
maybe.
if people take away anything from this episode, it's maybe a newfound spark or interest in their genealogy and their DNA and their ancestry so they can learn more about the people who brought them into this world, the people who came before them, and the people who have passed lots of things down to them. So, speaking of the healing aspect, tell us what you know about that.
Well, I know that okay, well, I want to there's a few things that I want to make sure that I touch on. So the first thing is you will probably know if you have a need for healing on one or both sides of your family because you will feel it. I definitely feel it. Well, it helps that I can see my tree. Like if I'm on Ancestry or, doing family search or Wikitree is great, by the way, because they have to have sources. So the stuff you're getting is probably accurate. Um, when I'm looking at my tree, I feel the energy of the people. And I know people don't normally do that, but because I've
But
been
you have
working on it,
pictures of everyone, right? So you're like picking up psychically on
I
stuff. Is that
I
what you're
don't
saying?
have pictures of everyone, but I do kind of create mental pictures of people, um, based on what I know about them. But when I see the spread, right, the tree growing before my eyes, like I feel you get to know about them. What did they do for a living? Where did they live? What could their life have been like in that time period? And I just get a really distinct feeling for the group of people that I'm working on. Now, that being said, I get the same feeling for my dad's side. They just seem like happy, simple farmers. At least the recent ancestors, they're just like day to day working on the farm, very simple. And then you get to my mom's side and it's just a mess, right? Like I don't think it's a coincidence that I have the mother wound. You know
Hmm.
that when I say that, do you know what I mean by that? Like it's a thing in the ether these days, the mother wound, and I think it's a very powerful one for me specifically. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that when I go to my mom's side of the tree, I feel yucky. It just feels like sticky, heavy
Tense.
energy. And it is not a coincidence that let's see, I went back 2 generations and found so much like domestic abuse. And I found like tons of the S word,
Hmm.
you know, you just checking yourself out of the hotel, uh, and just a ton of that. And I don't, I saw so much of it on my mom's side of the family that it kind of answered a lot of, okay, well, no wonder you feel like this when you're doing this side of the tree. Of course it feels repellent and like a magnet. That's like opposite magnets trying to attract. But also gave me a little bit of compassion. Not that I didn't have any before. I've worked a lot with my mom's stuff and I do feel for her, and without kind of giving in to her, I do feel for her situation, but it really gave me another level of compassion for, man, if you don't know that that you're carrying this stuff, how much can it really affect you? Look at what it can do if you don't know about it, and if you just kind
Yeah,
of
it's a lot
try
to
to
carry like unconsciously. And I think bringing it to the
yeah.
surface actually can bring some kind of relief.
Yeah. And so since then, I mean, I will get the courage to go back and dive headfirst into this line of my tree. But for now, I'm very happy with the simple farmers on my dad's side. I'm so happy that, they had pigs, they moved. I do have a lot of interesting stories from my dad's side. But not like that, not like horrible trauma that and how much of that am I carrying? Maybe the reason I feel that way about it and I can't see it really objectively is because I am attached to it and because I am connected to it. So I think that is when it can become necessary for your own spiritual growth to explore that healing aspect. I am definitely not an expert in it. I don't even want to do it, but most of our most profound healing we don't want to do, right? We just want to put our blinders on and pretend like it's not there. But I will get brave and do it someday. But one thing that I do to connect with my ancestors. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Let's go back to happy stuff for a second. I've started really just talking to them. I don't need to know what they look like. I don't need to know who they are. You don't need to know this stuff. You can just put the intention in your mind and say, what I say is universe, ancestors, angels, and guides. Sometimes I say just ancestors. When I come into my office and I'm ready to do my mindset work, I'll light my candle. I don't have an altar, but I can talk about what people put on their altars. I do want to make an altar, an ancestral altar. I just have to figure out where to put it where my kids won't paw at it. But I do light a candle. It's a pink. Pink is love, I guess. And they say that the pink rose quartz is also connected with ancestral work. So the color pink is usually connected to that. So I have a pink candle
Well,
that
it
I
makes
light.
sense because pink is like the heart chakra, pink and
Yeah.
green.
Yeah. So I light that and I say, "Hey ancestors, can't wait for you to surprise me today and make sure you let me know that you're here and I want to connect with you." And my ancestors are lighthearted, so they don't care how I talk to them as long as it's nice. I don't have to do a deep prayer. I don't think you have to do that because they're always kind of around you anyway. Even if they're long gone, an essence of them will still be alerted when you're talking to them. So same in the same way that guides will. Gosh, guides never even incarnated and they're just around all the time. They're ancient upon ancient. So if they're around, I don't see any reason why your ancestors can't be around. So yeah, I connect with them. I before bed, I say a little prayer and I just say good night, thank you, can't wait to see you tomorrow, kind of thing. And if I'm having a really bad day, I'll just like, okay, guys, I need help, like really silly stuff. But I can talk to them all the time. And sometimes it's specific. Sometimes I'll talk to my grandma or my grandpa. Sometimes I'll talk to my third great grandfather. He's always kind of the avatar in my head because he's been a brick wall for me. Kelsey knows for a decade, over a decade. He's been a brick wall in my family tree. I didn't know anything about him. Still don't really. I don't know a lot about him. I don't have a picture. I just know basic things. But I kind of created a persona for him. And I think it's probably pretty accurate. I think he kind of helped me with it. And so I talk to him sometimes. And I think the reason he's been such a profound sticky spot in my genealogy is because he's supposed to be important, right? And he's supposed to be a focus of mine so that I can connect with him in that way. Um, yeah. So yeah, just little things like that. There's really no wrong way to do it. If you want to do an altar, you can put the pictures that you do have. Totems. I have a pendant. I don't have anything from my grandparents. Nothing. They I just didn't I was already in California by the time they died, and so I didn't really get a chance to get anything. But I do have a picture of me and my grandma and my grandpa together with my son, and I'm wearing a certain necklace, and I still have the pendant from that necklace, so I just use that because that was the last picture I ever took with them, and I'm pretty sure she complimented me on my necklace, maybe. She would have. And so I just kept the pendant and I hang it on the candle holder, so it's like that's like my mini altar for them. But if you have any pictures, if you have any flowers that they liked, or just really any flowers would be good. Um, crystals, anything that you feel like will help you connect with them. There's no wrong way. And then you can just kind of use that. But it
That's so
really is just so fun.
beautiful. I
Yeah,
feel
it's so
all
fun.
warm and fuzzy listening to you talk about it.
That just means your ancestors are wanting you to do it.
Hey there, we hope you're enjoying this episode so far. But if you want to listen to the whole thing, we're going to invite you over to our podcast. Either search for High Vibing It on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to podcasts. Or even better, if you want to watch the extended video version of this episode that's even longer than the actual podcast itself, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/highvibe. Lindsay, tell them what's awesome about the Patreon.
Patreon is where we have all of our extended episodes. As Kelsey said, we have it on video, so you can actually see the things that we're talking about. Sometimes we have visual visual aids, and it's nice to know what we're talking about. We also have hangouts that we do sometimes that are exclusive to Patreon people. And you can get started with all of this and bonus content and everything that we have only for the Patreon people for as little as $3. I think it's $3.33 a month. And that's it. And you guys can get all the benefits and all access to everything that we put in there. Really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really cool, really fun, super easy to join. And you guys don't even have to do that to finish this episode. If you're like, screw it, I don't want to pay any money, I just want to hear the rest of this episode, go to our podcast, High Vibin' It, search for it wherever you listen. It's totally free. Either way, enjoy the rest of the show wherever you choose to enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week because we do a new one every week. Adios.
Bye.